It's Friday here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're going to be joined by Brian Batko. We're going to talk all about Steelers training camp again. The chippiness has gone up this week, and there's going to be some fireworks that we expect on Friday Night Lights practice. We'll get you previewed with all of that here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter. He's Brian Batko, one of our great Steelers beat writers. And today we are talking all things Steelers here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette on what's going on in Steelers training camp. And as always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our Pittsburgh sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And as always, this show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, there are over 500 different available beers, 300 of those beers from local Pittsburgh area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap. They're an amazing place to go, the best bar in Pittsburgh. More on them later. Brian is still out there in Latrobe, while I am a slacker in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and I am home in my AC chilling in front of my home studio mic. Brian is in his car sweating it out at St. Vincent College. Brian, how do you do it?
You know, this would be terrible for a kid or a dog to be left in this, but right now I feel like it's kind of like a bit of a sauna. I'm sweating out the lunch that I had today up at the St. Vincent cafeteria. I might start dripping at some point on the stream, but, if you see that, pay me no mind. I'm doing fine. And if it gets too bad and distracting, I'll just boot up the car and get the AC blasting even more.
It's like, oh no, someone help that child. Someone help that dog. Oh no, that's just a reporter. He's fine.
That's just some dumb podcast guy talking to Chris.
Another
Carter.
dumb podcast guy.
What is he thinking? But honestly, you know how these days are, Chris. They're compressed. We're driving an hour or so there and back every day. It's my dad's birthday tonight, so I'm gonna go have dinner with the fam. Yeah, so we're gonna knock this out and hopefully, knock on wood, no big news between whatever time it is right now on Thursday and when people watch this on Friday.
No, yeah, I agree. And speaking of knocking out, the Steelers were doing a lot of knocking around when it came to physicality this week. The pads went on Tuesday. We talked a little bit of that on Wednesday, but then Wednesdays and Thursdays practice, there's been a lot of chippiness. There was the big fight that everyone talked about on Wednesday's practice that kind of turned a lot of heads. Then there was some more scrapping going on Thursday. I missed the Wednesday practice because I was at Pitt football camp, but Thursday I was there and saw more of it, and also saw
a few of the guys were like, "Oh wait, is that Carter? Yeah, he wasn't here yesterday. We got to put on the show for him. Yeah, he missed it."
But it kind of I did see that there was kind of on Thursday there were no pads, so they didn't hit as much. But there were some plays where the defense kind of got in a bump a little bit more, and they knocked the guy down. And some of the offensive players were like, "Oh, really? You're going to do that now when the pads are off?" And there's a little bit of testiness here. But Brian, I get the feeling. There's some people oh, the travesty of fights in training camp. One, training camps happen every year in every football team. That happens from pros to college to high school. But I think there's a sense of there are people in the Steelers they want this to happen. They want to see the intensity and just how much they can poke and prod and what they can get out of, especially the young guys on offense that they're trying to make into a bully offense.
I was asking guys about that on report day, Chris. I mean, we started hearing in OTAs and mini camp from players about how Arthur Smith was challenging them on offense to be the most physical offense in the league. So I kind of took that to guys like Elandon Roberts, Deshaun Elliott, known as hard hitters throughout long, prosperous NFL careers for themselves, and said, are you guys going to welcome that challenge and embrace that once, camp really gets going with the pads? And they both were like, yeah, man, come out and show us. Let's see it if that's what you want to be. So, I mean, I think on one hand, you don't want anything to cross that line, right? I mean, the stuff that happened Wednesday came pretty close to being foolishness, in my opinion. I mean, when you've got guys throwing haymakers, you can hit your finger on a helmet and stuff. I mean, you don't want any of that. You also, of course, don't want any sort of actual division within a team. You don't want guys on offense being like, the guys on defense are, annoying and and whatever and hardos, and you don't want the guys on defense being like, I'm so sick of these guys yapping on offense that I'm annoyed by them and I'm going to get my shots in. You don't want that. I think at times there were some moments on Thursday where like Najee Harris, hard to tell sometimes with him if he's being playful or not, or if he really means it. But there was like a legitimate annoyance a couple times with, you mentioned Patrick Queen kind of running up on Jaylen Warren, thudding him from behind. Mm-hmm. We know those were two guys who did not like each other, admittedly, very much in the Baltimore-Pittsburgh clashes of the last couple years, who would like playing against Jaylen Warren or Patrick Queen, respectively. There was another play later in practice. Miles Killebrew flattened one of the backup running backs, LaMichael Pirine.
Yeah.
And it was just a bit much. And, Michael Pruitt yelled at him. Najee Harris yelled at him. They kind of gave it to Terrell Austin, too, who was like, yeah, I'll handle it. He knew his guy was in the wrong when you're not in pads. So that's kind of a funny thing to me. It's like when you think about Miles Killebrew, Landon Roberts, Patrick Queen giving some extracurricular activity, these aren't like young knuckleheads, guys trying to stand out. I mean, these are pros, vets who are going to be on the roster, and maybe they are trying to challenge that young offense a little bit. Or maybe we're all overanalyzing it, and it's just, if you've ever played any competitive sports, sometimes the juices get flowing, you can't control yourself, and, you do something that you probably shouldn't have done, and maybe you dap a guy up later, say, hey, my bad, man, I went a little too far.
No, yeah, I think that I also think that people need to understand this happens when grown men are playing a physical sport and they're competing against each other, on days. And again, the offense wants to beat the defense. Defense wants to beat the offense. This is intentional to pit because competition breeds success. That's very much part of the model that the Steelers want to have in training camp. So I think that there's some that feel like there's a clutching of pearls. It's like, oh heavens, how is this going down? But this is kind of what they want. But eventually there does need to be that unification where everyone gets on the same page. Hey, like, I may not like that other guy, but you know what? When we go up against other team, he's wearing the same colors as me, and it's time for us to go. And I think that's why it's cool to have inter-team practices like they're going to have with the Buffalo Bills before their preseason game, so that they can kind of take it out on another team for a little bit and have those and build those camaraderie. Because that's when I think sometimes the brotherhood can get built, is when you see, like, you've been at war, like George Pickens has been at war with Joey Porter, Jaylen Warren's been at war with Patrick Queen, but when it's time to strap up against another squad, they're all on the same page, and I think that's going to be part of the other part of the test here as training camp continues.
And the biggest thing is you don't want to be an undisciplined team, and I don't think you need to worry about that with guys who've been around the block, like Landon Roberts, like Miles Killebrew. Patrick Queen seems like maybe he could lose his stuff when the Steelers play the Ravens later on in the season, but other than that, I think he can keep his cool and keep his head. So, yeah, I mean, these are training camp happenings. We're just kind of reporting on what we see, and I mean, if anything, yeah, it could be looked at as a positive that this offense isn't backing down from anybody. This defense isn't backing down from anybody. Right now, they're taking it out on each other. And Mike Tomlin always says, a win for the offense is a loss for the defense, and vice versa. That's just the nature of things this time of year. So, I mean, the offense got the better of the defense on Wednesday. The defense punched back a little bit, figuratively, not literally, early in 7 shots on Thursday. But then the offense finished with a 2-minute drill, Chris, and we can get into that a little bit in the next segment if you'd like.
Yeah, actually, that's a great segue, because that's why I wanted to get into a little bit there. We could talk more about what we're seeing there. Also want to talk about Markus Golden and your thoughts on his addition. I know that you and Jerry talked about that a little bit, during our stand-up post-practice thoughts, but we wanted to get more into that a little bit here. We'll do so on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. But first, I want to remind you, the show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, they have over 500 different available beers, 300 of those beers from the local Pittsburgh area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap all day, every day. And you can go in there. They're always switching new ones in and out. You can experience whatever type of beer that you like. They have everything from Hefeweizens to IPAs to stouts. It's an amazing collection of beer. They also have over 20 televisions. They have outdoor seating, so you can enjoy life in the summer, looking out on the skyline of downtown Pittsburgh before, during, after Pirates games. It's a great location. It's the best bar in Pittsburgh. They also have amazing food like steak on a stone, where you get your choice cut of steak brought to you on a heated stone. Every time you cut off a piece, just press it into the stone and you choose how well done you want every single bite. It's the best bar in Pittsburgh. Go there today. When you get there, tell them Chris sent you. Back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Brian Batko. Brian, before we get into the offense, I wanted to ask you just more thoughts on Markus Golden. We talked briefly about it. This to me was not a surprise. I even said this before training camp when people were asking me, well, aren't they short at edge rusher? All they have is Watt, Highsmith, and Herbig. This seems like it's doomed to fail as soon as an injury happens. And I'm like, guys, Markus Golden is an older guy. He's a free agent right now. I'm pretty sure they're going to call upon him unless someone emerges in training camp that they feel can be that fourth man in the rotation. And lo and behold, Markus Golden is getting signed to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not that it's a surprise here, Brian, but I think it's the move that always made sense.
Yeah, great in the locker room. I mean, he's somebody who I don't think he had any problems with his role last year. And that was the big thing. I and many of us were curious about. Anyone who lived through the Melvin Ingram situation of, what was that, 2020 or 2021? One of those 2 years, that 2021, I think it was. So we know that number 3 outside linebacker role / number 4, it's ideal to have a young ascending player like Nick Herbig in there, or some of the undrafted guys who they've hit on in the past. But, sometimes you do need to bring in veteran reinforcements. Let's be honest, TJ Watt has not been able to stay healthy over the course of a season for, most of the last few years. The way he plays with reckless abandon, it makes him great. It's part of what makes him great. It's part of what makes him, I don't want to say injury prone, but at least susceptible to bad things happening when he's throwing himself around and playing with that kind of motor. So you do need to guard against that if you're the Steelers. They ran into that issue in the playoffs last year. As far as guys like Jeremiah Moon and Kyron Johnson, who were fighting to kind of stay on the roster this year at that spot. I mean, I don't know how much they really got a chance to show in training camp. Sometimes you see those Tuzar Skippers and Ola Adaney types, come through in the preseason. But now it seems like the Steelers aren't banking on that as much. They're going to basically run it back with what they had last year, which was a pretty good group and got a lot of pressure on opposing quarterbacks, at least until TJ went down yet again.
Yeah, I think there's again, you look at the depth that they can have there. Herbig's going to be better. Golden's going to, yeah. I think that he's sharper. People are talking about him like he's already sharper. I mean, he was pretty sharp last year for a rookie. So having Golden back just gives you the full complement of those guys. I think it only makes just a ton of sense. But let's get back into training camp stuff real quick here. You talked about the offense and the 2-minute drill. What did you see? I had to skedaddle from there because I had to go see Jeff Capel and talk about Pitt basketball, which, by the way, you can also read at post-gazette.com. But what did you see? What did you see there from the 2-minute drill?
Justin Fields did some skedaddling as well, and in the end, the offense did convert a touchdown to win that competition period. Fields goes up top to George Pickens out of the slot, ended up getting the matchup they wanted. Patrick Queen was on Pickens, and Fields threw a fastball to him. George Pickens did George Pickens things and caught it over top of Queen. I'm pretty sure he controlled this one to the ground. Sometimes the focus can be one of the very few knocks on Pickens as a player, but pretty sure he made that catch over top of Queen. And there's in these non-padded 2-minute drills, there's always going to be some ambiguous plays. One in particular, I mean, I think Watt knifed in there and would have had a quote-unquote sack on Justin Fields, and TJ even kind of half speed did his little knee raise sack celebration, but Fields just kind of kept playing through it, scanned the field, found somebody over the middle, and they gave them the completion. Probably wanted to see the offense in a situation where the field gets condensed and you take that 7 shots mentality to the end of a 2-minute drill. And Arthur Smith was pretty good on it afterwards, saying, it Fields wasn't perfect, but he loved that the offense was able to execute when it's the end of practice. Everybody's tired. You've been sweating all day. You know, that's usually when the mental assignments or the mental errors, the missed assignments occur. And, you know, maybe there were some, but not enough to be derailed by a defense that did have most of the big boys back in the fold today.
Yeah, I think there's it's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out too when the pads go back on for Friday Night Lights, which which we're going to talk more about in a bit here. You know, I'm interested to see when everybody practices, because like also Minka Fitzpatrick is sitting out, right? Like the Steelers are very much are comfortable with certain guys on defense being being out because you know what you're going to get from them, but there's still that sense you want to see what you guys all do as a unit, and what also your offense does to all those guys as a unit. And so I do think there's still that anxiety that's hanging there. The
other tough thing to evaluate is like Fields. He scrambled for a first down, I think, too, on one of the 2-minute drill plays, or maybe he just set up that final touchdown pass. And you know, when you're scrambling in that environment. Well, we found out Wednesday you can't hit the quarterback. You definitely can't hit the Steelers quarterback, or you're going to get an earful about it. So, yeah, I mean, it's football-like. It's not football, as Mike Tomlin always says. We won't really see Justin Fields' progression and development, I think, until the preseason. And even then, I mean, ask anybody about the 2023 Steelers offense in exhibition games and how that translated to the real thing. So yeah, I mean, still good to see them get that done. I'll just note the second team offense with Kyle Allen leading the way. I mean, they moved in fits and starts, as you'll sometimes see, and his last pass was tipped. Jarrad Jenkins caught it, tried to toe tap. The officials called him in. I don't think he actually was. I think I think Terrell Asta would have thrown the red flag on that one, and it would have been coming back. But yeah, I didn't think it was a great day for Kyle Allen, albeit as the third string quarterback. Who knows if he's even going to be on the team. But yeah, I'll just kind of leave that as one more quarterback related note. Russell Wilson did 7 on 7 only again, and he looks really good throwing the ball, albeit with no pass rush and having a lot of time to try to pick apart the secondary. But he threw some absolute dimes in that period, Chris.
Very interesting to see that. I remember at the start of camp, there were a couple of days there where Justin Fields looked like he was kind of figuring things out, and Kyle Allen was looking kind of smooth. But I think that everyone who was kind of starting to feel that has backed off of that after some time.
Yeah, let's not even go down that road. Kyle Allen's a nice player. Mike Tomlin gave him some credit on one play Thursday where he kind of made a quick read and got out of the pocket in a hurry. He's kind of sneaky fast. I mean, he was a former big time recruit, but no, I don't think there's really much jockeying for position there. Justin Fields had a really nice throw in 11 on 11 to Connor Heyward.
Yeah,
he's not the biggest corner. He's not the biggest target to hit deep downfield, but Fields pretty much put it where only he could get it. And you got to give Heyward credit for he makes so many catches that you're just like, man, a dude of your stature should not be able to go up and get that and pull it in the way you do. But another deceptively athletic guy and really sticky hands when he gets his chances.
I think it's going to be interesting to see the different pass catchers that work their way into the Steelers offense, especially with no bona fide second wide receiver, which I know everyone is still wondering what's going to happen there. But I want to talk to you more about what to expect with Friday Night Lights, because that's always a very important practice. And just because of the spectacle of it, it's one thing. But Brian, let's get into that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They're your mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci today for a free consultation. We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Brian Batko, who's still in his car sweating it out in St. Vincent College at training camp. Brian, Friday Night Lights is upon us. It happens tonight if you're listening to / watching this show on Friday. There's always a bit of excitement around this. The pads go on. It's the chance that we get to see some more backs on backers. And there's some things there. What are some things that you're looking to see maybe specifically with tonight's practice?
Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose for Friday Night Lights at Latrobe Memorial Stadium. No, it'll be cool. I actually have not covered it since my first year on the beat in 2019. Obviously, we had a couple COVID camps. 2022 got rained out last year. Ray Fittipaldo took that one for me. I think it fell on my daughter's birthday. So I'll be excited to be back there in the corner of the one end zone at Latrobe Memorial Stadium. That's usually where they stage the backs on backers. The fans are kind of right up on you on the fence. A little bit of Cameron Crazy's vibe down there for that. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much, near the top of my list of what I want to see. But beyond that, Chris, I mean, and that's just a spectacle. It could be really anybody taking part in those reps, and you don't know who's going to get detonated and sort of, make for some entertaining, albeit barbaric football fodder. O-line, D-line one-on-ones, if that gets spotlighted in any way, I want to see how Troy Fautanu, Zach Frazier, Mason McCormick, how do they keep the momentum going from, a big week for them. And Wednesday,
Yeah.
The fighting has nothing to do with how well you can seal your man, how well you can get to the second level and block people. But Arthur Smith was pretty complimentary of those three. The mentality, as he put it, it's nice to see them bite a little bit, which I thought was a cool little turn of phrase by someone who's given plenty of press conferences over the last few years as the Falcons head coach. But also, he mentioned that Zach Frazier, and I think this is going to be the way Frazier is as an NFL center if all works out for him. You don't notice him a ton, but with his style of play, it's a good thing because he's operating so cleanly. The snap's getting back there in time, and it's on target. He's, he's taking care of his guy. He's sort of looking for work, but he's just never out of position. And I think that was even kind of the read on him by a lot of the draft analysts coming out of Morgantown was, yeah, I mean, he's not a humongous guy who's going to just absolutely be tossing people. He might be able to do that at times with his wrestling background, and he's certainly nasty enough when he gets in those trenches, but just a fundamentally technique sound center. So, I mean, I'll be curious to see if he rises to that occasion, if they do have some of those. Really just, buckle up your chin strap and bite down on that mouth guard type of one-on-ones.
Certainly be very interested to see him do well there. I think we've seen Troy Fautanu do that. I'll be interested to see, too, if Broderick Jones is healthy enough to do some more hitting than he was. He's been with the team, but he was not. I think he was still recovering when they were doing one-on-ones with the linemen on Tuesday. So I'll be intrigued to see, does he get more of a chance there to show his physicality and how him and Fautanu and Dan Moore look together. But also, I'm interested to see if the run game looks as confident as I thought it did on Tuesday. I wasn't there for the Wednesday practice, Brian, but whenever Najee Harris got the ball, they were getting yards. And I could tell when Jaylen Warren got in, it was a little bit tougher because he was running with the second team a lot of times. But on Tuesday, I mean, Najee Harris, every time he touched the ball in 7 shots, touchdown. Every time he touched the ball in 11 on 11, it was at least 5, 6, 7 yards, maybe even more. And I just wonder, with a team that wants to stuff the run more consistently this year, I feel like it's good to see the Steelers run the ball, but you want to see the Steelers defense stop the run as well. And I think that's where it's going to be that iron on iron that could be very interesting in camp.
Yeah, I don't think there will be any more skirmishes Friday night. I mean, you've been there. The Latrobe feel is a little more collegial feel, good vibes, but that doesn't mean that it's not intense. And I think when you get in that, the environment is shrunken from the multiple fields that you have to work on out at St. Vincent College. It's really just the one slab of grass for the most part, and it feels a little bit more like you're playing back in a high school game. All eyes are on the ball and the play at all times. So, I mean, that makes it fun. That makes it, it ups the ante for the players, and I think they will probably do a lot of inside run type of work, Chris, to your point, and, see how these young guys get it going, see if they continue to stack some good days because they're competing. I think Dan Moore Jr. and Nate Herbig are having sort of quietly good camps thus far. You're not noticing them in any negative ways for the most part. And Herbig especially, I was not all that impressed with him this time of year last summer. But I think he's really worked on his game and worked on his balance and worked to try to become somebody who, hey, I'm not just a jobber who's here for Zach Frazier to leap over me. Like I'm trying to keep this job. And even if it's only for one more season, I'll go get paid by another team if I play well enough.
Yeah, there's a lot of competition factors here that make training camp exciting for multiple reasons. I guess I'll ask this to you, Brian. Is there an expectation of when we see Russell Wilson run the runs in real time? Because we knew that he was coming back to practice this week, but it's been Justin Fields running the ones in all the full contact, and even still in 7 shots on Thursday when it wasn't even in pads. Do you have an expectation of when we will see this offense fully intact with the way they intend it to be?
No, I don't. And I don't know it would be kind of a cool spectacle, I suppose, if he makes his Steelers training camp full participation debut out at the Friday Night Lights practice. But yeah, I mean, Mike Tomlin really didn't offer any sort of update on Thursday. And I don't think any of us really pried or poked around about it. Again, the arm strength and everything looks great in those 7-on-7 moments that you get from him, but you still have to wonder about the health of that calf, considering he's not really being put into any circumstances where he does have to get on the move, where he does have to run with any sort of intensity. So I don't know if it happens tonight. I don't know if they just kind of arbitrarily use week 3 of camp as the target for him, or if this thing lingers all the way into the preseason and maybe that sled pushing snafu was worse than everybody let on.
Absolutely. He's Brian Batko of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm Chris Carter. We will both be on hand for Friday Night Lights. I always forget I need to not speak for other people and their responsibilities with practices and such. Brian, thanks so much for joining us. Get out of there, put the AC on, get to driving so you can get home and get some rest. Thank you, Brian, and thank you all for tuning into the North Shore Drive podcast. As always, you can find the show every Monday, Wednesday, Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Don't forget, we will have stand-ups after every practice, including one after Friday Night Lights. We'll have a brief talk there. He's Brian Batko. I'm Chris Carter. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you again Friday evening to later tonight with our stand-up reactions to Friday Night Lights at Steelers training camp. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.